Hi! Welcome to another Facebook Live organised by the lovely Bibado Aug team. Today it's talking about weaning and nutrition, and we have the lovely Geraldine and the lovely Marie here with us today. First of all, maybe just a couple of introductions I thought would be good for everybody. So Geraldine Curran, who's the food nutritionist, and then Marie Farmer, who's just about to launch a new mini mealtime app. So Geraldine, do you want to just say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I've been a nutritionist for about 10 years. I have 3 sons, so quite averse to baby weaning. A lot older now though. I got into nutrition through one of my sons being not very well. The youngest one, he had some severe allergies, so there's quite a few things that we had to do. And I didn't want him on medication for the rest of his life, so I really wanted to learn more about food, so that's how I became a nutritionist. And the food nutritionist was launched a couple of years ago, and yes, that's me. So don't forget, answer all your questions. We're looking forward to them.
You also do a lot of classes as well, don't you? For
I do loads of baby weaning classes, and yes, loads of baby weaning classes. I do loads of one-to-ones. I do loads of talks. So quite a lot of things that I do. Yes,
especially
thank you for that.
Yeah, and then there's Marie. So do you want to just say a little bit about your journey and what you're doing?
Hi, my name is Marie Farmer and I'm the founder of the soon-to-be launched app Mini Mealtimes. It's an app that helps parents track the nutritional value of the food that their children are eating so that they can get an idea of their eating habits and what's in everything that they're eating. And I started this idea probably about 1.5 years ago when my son was coming off weaning and going on to solid foods a bit more regularly when he was 1 year old, and it was a headache. I had so many questions, didn't know who to ask. I was doubting myself all the time and thought there must be an app that can help me with that, and there wasn't, so I decided to create one myself. So relatively new to nutrition, but similar to what you just said, I think a lot of people start their journeys in nutrition because of sort of their families, and that's what sort of gives them the drive and interest in it initially. So hopefully we'll be able to answer any of your questions, and it'll be exciting. So thanks for having me.
And maybe just a little bit about myself. So I'm Abby and I'm co-founder of a company called Jack and Amelie, and we make frozen homemade meals for kids. And again, about the personal journey that we were on. So when we went back to work when our kids were 12 months, that's myself, my business partner Sophie, we were struggling to make homemade food all the time and found that what was out there from the convenience sector didn't really fulfill what our kids were looking for in terms of the types of food, in terms of flavour and texture. There was a lot of the puree based kind of stage 3 foods which just didn't suit my children, and what else was out there just didn't seem that it was interesting enough or varied enough in terms of how we wanted to feed our kids. So that's a bit about us. So today's session is kind of broken up into 2 parts. It's to talk about the early stages, baby-led weaning versus something like puree meals, and then also to talk about that transition when kids get a bit older. So at about 12 months, when actually it's a lot more about the food that they're eating, and that journey. So maybe just to kick off then, one of the first questions that we've had come in is from Gemma Jenkins, and her question is, what are the best foods to start with when you start weaning your kids? So Geraldine,
definitely vegetables. And so what I would be suggesting as well is the starchy vegetables, because there are different types of vegetables. So you have your non-starchy and then you have your starchy, and what I try to say to people is starchy vegetables are the ones that are mainly grown under the ground. You can do different things with them. You can add, so for instance, if you decide that you're going to puree a carrot, so you can do a carrot, but you can also add in breast milk as well. It's just about absorption, because the baby's gut is very immature when you first start weaning, which is why you should really leave until 6 months. And so the baby's gut is very, very immature. So what you want to do is facilitate that process of digesting. So if you're breastfeeding, you can add in a little bit of your breast milk just to try. I always suggest that you start at lunchtimes. It's a lot easier. You can see whether there's a reaction, there's going to be any reactions to the food. So it's always best to kind of start at lunchtime. That's, personal preference, but it really is about being a lot easier. Most people at lunchtime are a bit more relaxed. And if you're going to baby-led wean, then my suggestion would be that you still do the same, but this time you don't puree the carrots. You just kind of make them into little squares that the baby can actually hold in their hand quite easily.
And either's suitable for straight off. It doesn't matter whether you do.
Is suitable for straight off. Yeah. I think one of the most important things is, again, we're all so aware, aren't we, at this moment, of sugars in the diet, and obviously these are carbohydrates. They are going to be sugars, but they're more natural sugars in the diet. And so rather than using things like fruit, you're much better off by using those starchy carbohydrates, just to get the palate going and to get them used to kind of sort of a more savoury based, even though they are carbs, food. And
just in terms of preparing the vegetables, then just boil them or roast them, or does it matter?
I think the easiest way to do it actually is to probably steam them.
Okay.
So I have a steamer with the water on underneath, and then I would steam them on the top. And if they're carrots, then you have to steam them for a little bit longer, because you want to make sure they're nice and soft, but not too soft.
Yeah.
If you're going to baby-led wean, then cut them into sort of batons, so strips. But it doesn't really matter so much if you're going to puree it, because if you're going to puree it, then you can just chop it all up and just pop it in there, and then you can mash it up.
Yeah. So, steaming is the best way to keep all the nutrients in as well.
Yes,
so
yeah, definitely.
Kind of ideally, the best way to prepare them and keep them nice and delicious. But I think my son's first ever meal, when we started trying him on solids, was avocado mixed with breast milk.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good one, isn't it, to puree with, cause it's so soft anyway.
Yeah. So if you think about an avocado, then you're putting in breast milk with it. Then you're looking at lauric acid, because that's a thing from breast milk. So it's a medium chain fatty acid. So it's a really good one. And again, it's all about that brain. You know, 60% fat. You're putting in lauric acid. That's just brilliant for the brain. Yeah. And then you've got avocado as well.
Yeah.
So
and it's so easy to prepare. All you have to do is cut it up, and you don't have to do anything. So I think for a fast food, that's quite a good one. Very easy when you're first starting out, and like you said, carrots. What else?
Be careful with the fruits, though, is probably what you're saying as well.
Yeah, I'm saying be careful. I wouldn't suggest starting with the fruits. I definitely would be suggesting that you start
things
with
like banana would be a sort of go-to for a lot of people, but then that's probably a really high sugar content.
And it is. It's a very high sugar content.
Yeah.
So so that would be further down the line. Yeah, definitely. And also, like you were saying about avocado, that's when you start mixing different foods together. You can easily mix in a banana into the avocado, because what you would be doing then is you would be actually like basically stopping that insulin response, because the fats will be digested before the carbohydrate's going to be digested.
Yeah, which really
we were
discussion
saying
about that earlier, didn't we?
Pre-show.
Yeah.
So it's all about that.
And the other thing as well, I remember I spoke to a friend when she was starting out, and she very much followed only one vegetable at a time to not confuse their taste buds, and she very much strictly tried one vegetable at any one time. Does that matter? Do you encourage mixing up flavours?
I think initially you should really just be doing one vegetable at a time, because what you're making sure there's no reaction there.
Okay. Yeah, that was the thing, the allergies. I was so worried about him being allergic weirdly to anything, so I was like writing it down, going, he had this week, no reaction, so foray into something else. I was very anal about it.
Yeah, and also to remember that under the year, it's kind of playing with food, really, isn't it? To get in their taste buds and things like that. So it's those sort of things.
Okay. The other question then that we've had is from Kate Mitchell, and she says, my baby seems ready and shows a lot of interest in our food, but is only 4 months. Should they wait till 6 months to start introducing food?
Definitely, because you've got to, if you look at the digestive tract is very, very thin. It's not even a centimetre wide. It's very, very thin. And so if you then start putting foods down, then it's got to deal with those foods, and it's most of the time it's just not mature enough to deal with those foods. We would have waited until a baby was about 18 months before we weaned in the days gone by, before we could go into the shops and actually purchase food. Yeah. We wouldn't have sat at home pureeing foods. We would have just waited until the baby could sit up next to us, and then actually that's how we would be feeding the baby. We just wouldn't be. It's just too immature. Yeah. There's a fine balance. You've got on the one hand that if you start at 4 months, then you're liable to be looking at different allergies, because there's some foods the baby might be able to take, but other foods they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And then if you leave it too long, so if you leave it until 8 months before you wean, then you can be looking at fussiness. So you've got to hit it smack bang.
So 6 months is kind of the sweet spot, and that's the recommended age anyway, definitely. Really, isn't it?
And for all reasons, really, digestion
is so important. I mean, I can't stress how important digestion is. It's you know, it's the pinnacle of all our health, because that's how we're getting our nutrients, and nutrients make us grow.
Yeah.
You know, we will talk about proteins, fats and carbohydrates, but really it's all about vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin C, the nutrients.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And how much then? So when you're starting out, how much? So is it just that you maybe just start with that one lunchtime meal to start off
one
with?
lunchtime meal. I used
And
to
what
say
are the
about
stages?
about 1 ounce. That's what I normally say.
Okay.
Then I might look at introducing, so I might start off with that, and then I might look at going to breakfast and lunch,
Yeah.
but still carrying on with the 1 ounce.
Is there sort of a specified timing for that kind of journey, or does it matter? It just depends on how your child shows
Yeah,
interest?
I think it really depends on your child. I think you've really got to look at where and how much they accept. So if they're not accepting, you know, then leave it for a little bit. It's
That's what I
absolutely
did.
not a problem.
Yeah, my son wasn't really ready to start regularly eating solid foods until he was about a year, and so I was still happily breastfeeding him, because breast milk is still the perfect food for them at that age, really. So there's no need to rush putting them on solids if they're not ready. You know, you shouldn't be trying to force it if they're not ready. But I would definitely reiterate what you just said. Ideally not before 6 months. Yeah. Ideally.
And because there's a lot of other foods as well. So things like rusks is obviously a big thing that people used to give kids when they're younger. Avoid anything like that. Keep it just natural whole foods.
Natural whole foods. It probably doesn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So it's causes sugar spikes.
Yeah.
So I would not give
rice milk. Rice porridge and things is another thing that people encourage you to have, don't they? Quite early on. But again,
sugar spikes.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're feeding them. You're feeding them sugar. You feed them a carrot, then you're mixing it up with loads and loads of different vitamins and minerals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not going to be the case. Sorry.
It's okay. Water interlude. Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? You go to the baby aisle sometimes and there's so much there in front of you that because it's got an age on it, you think, well, that's the thing that you should give your child, but you don't. It's overwhelming at times, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be.
What to choose, what is the right thing to go with, and all the different baby porridges and all the different stages. That's the other thing, the second, third sage and first, second, third stage that they have in all the packs. Yeah.
Well,
pay too much attention to that? Or?
I mean, I'm all for real food.
Yeah.
The real food, and that's, to me, if you can get your baby started on real food. Another reason why I started my baby-led weaning classes, or my baby weaning classes, not baby-led necessarily, because I just felt that there's so much information out there, and it is the food that is in the supermarkets that are being marketed to our children. Is that really good for our children?
Yeah.
So we have to question that. So there are some very good makes out there. I'm not sitting here saying there aren't. There are some really good ones out there that, if you're busy and you're out at a theme park for the day or something, then that's
convenience is great. Yeah. But it is very confusing, isn't it? As a mum going down that aisle and seeing all the different packs.
Yeah, there's so much choice. I think people get really overwhelmed and then they sort of grab it and then gravitate to the same thing over and over again, and then don't necessarily look too deep. If their child is eating it and they seem happy, you think, I think this is healthy, and let's just go from there. But yeah, that was kind of what...
Actually, I think that's a good point that you make, because you know, if you think, they're happy, and so therefore you give them the same food and the same food and the same food, and then that can lead to allergies. That also can lead to fussy eating, because they're just getting used to that.
They fixate on
they're not getting the variety that they need.
And I think as well, fussy eating and bad habits, because they're like, they'll only eat this one thing, so I can only give them that. And then you're sort of making a rod for your own back, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely.
It's very...
And then just the general discussion between baby-led weaning versus puree. I'm assuming there's no right or wrong.
No, there isn't.
And what do you, from your classes, what do you experience when you speak to parents? Do you have a real mix of people in terms of what they choose to do, whether they do puree versus baby-led?
I have some mums that only want a baby-led.
Yeah.
And I have some mums that only want to... You know, I had one mum that said, I really just don't want to do that. I'm just going to puree feed, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And then obviously, but the majority of people probably, like, I'm sure you probably do both.
Yeah, the mix. Well, that's the third option. There's a third category where you do both, and you mix between the two depending on the day. I find. Yeah.
I had one of my clients, really interesting. She had twins, a girl and a boy, and the girl was only ever wanted to feed herself. So she would. She just wanted them, because the mum was saying, I'm really getting worried, I'm not sure what to do. And I said, well, let her just feed herself. The boy didn't want to know.
Really?
He only wanted to be spoon-fed.
Yeah.
So I used to say to her, I mean, obviously I'm sure most mums do, give him the spoon to hold.
Yeah.
And then just feed him. So go to the baby what they want to do.
Yeah.
I think the good thing about baby-led weaning is they're in control.
Yeah.
They're more in control. So you may be giving them a different variety of foods in the end,
Yeah.
but they're choosing which one to pick.
Is that the thing then? Is it best you'd put out a few different options on a plate for them as well, just to see what they engage in?
I mean, not initially, because initially you're just going to start with, say, carrots and things like that, but even like sweet corn is a really good one where they pick it up and they just suck it, and broccoli and things like that. But if you think about your own plate when you're eating your food, if you're giving them the same as your food, what you've got, then they will have a choice over which ones they pick.
Yeah.
And a lot of research says that because they choose that, they will choose the foods that they can actually assimilate at that time.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, baby-led weaning is a lot more better on the bowel because they're making the choice.
Yeah. I did notice that actually. I remember something, I can't remember what food it was, but I noticed that with my son. There were certain foods that he definitely kept pushing away.
Yeah.
And it was almost like he knew he couldn't have it. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. I've also noticed, and I don't know what your experiences have been, but talking with other mothers, other parents and myself, I've noticed that a lot of first-time parents tend to do puree, and then once they've had their second or their third child, I notice a lot of them tend to gravitate towards baby-led, and they don't even realise they're doing it. It's sort of a conscious thing, so I don't know what your experience has been. Yeah,
that probably would follow through. My experience is that it's mothers that breastfeed tend to baby-led wean. They tend to be the ones that first-time mums. Yeah. But obviously, by the time I think you've got your second, and as with me,
you're much more relaxed.
You're much more relaxed. You have a little bit less time because you generally got to get one off to school. Yeah. So you're just
fun for yourself.
Yeah. So and I think with my third, with my third, I don't think my husband and I slept in the same bed for we might start out in the same bed.
You get
we might have
kicked
started
out.
out in the same bed, but he would get kicked out.
Daddy.
All three of them would be.
So they know what they want.
One of the other two would be there. So I think it's
couple of questions coming through on Facebook Live at the moment. So there's a lady called Kiara. So it says here, my daughter it says a high carb. I think she means high carb diet. And can you give me some ideas of meals? But she's only 7 months. So I don't know if that's that her daughter's maybe showing a bit of a preference to more carbohydrate type foods. So what would be some meal ideas that she can give to her kids?
That's why you say start on the vegetables, don't you?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I mean, the vegetables obviously are carbohydrates, but they're wrapped up in other things. Yeah. And so the fiber's there and everything like that, so it slows that release of sugar. Yeah.
So if they're showing a preference to what we would maybe traditionally call, I'm assuming maybe breadsticks or maybe it's those kind of things, what would be not good alternatives? Is that where the earthy vegetables come in and give a similar kind of feel and eat? Yeah.
I think that, again, you've got to sort of look at how baby was born. Yeah. Because that does matter, because it's all about gut bacteria. Mm-hmm. So, and then after that, they'll lean to the preference if they want, depending on what gut bacteria they want to feed. Mm-hmm. So, what I would be suggesting, certainly, obviously not knowing the foods that she's on, but if it's breadsticks, in my thing, I would say don't give them breadsticks. Yeah. It's very, very, very rapidly absorbed with the sugars, and so that wouldn't be a really good first food. But things like at 7 months, I would be putting maybe two different types. So one of the ones that you said earlier would be avocado. You can mix that with banana, but at that age that would be a lot better. So therefore you're getting your fat and you're getting your protein, you're getting your fat and you're getting your carbohydrate. Yeah. So if you start sitting down and saying every meal that I feed my child, I'm going to have either a fat or a protein mixed in with the carbohydrate.
I think you've talked about this a lot actually, because quite often when I think about carbohydrate, I straight away think of maybe like a starchy potato or very much, the wheat-based type products. But you do talk a lot about the fact that actually your vegetables are a carbohydrate.
They are your carbohydrate.
And I don't think that's what we naturally think.
No, you forget, you do.
Yeah, which vegetables are particularly good in terms of being carbohydrates?
So all of the vegetables are carbohydrates apart from peas.
Okay,
because they're a protein, and avocado. which is a fat.
Yeah.
But all the rest of them, not saying that they don't have some protein in them, because they do.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that they and we know, the avocado is mainly based around fat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to try and think, okay, so if I'm going to feed a carrot or sweet potato, and then you've got some chicken or you've got some broth, then you can mix that in, and that way you've got your fat and your protein in there as well. Yeah. Because the fats and the protein is what's going to help baby grow, what's going to help brain function, and they're just so important in the diet.
So that's maybe like a sort of a stew would be a nice option as a meal suggestion, thinking of Chiara's question there, where you get the carbohydrates from the really starchy type vegetables, and then a nice broth.
Spinach and like either sweet potato or just normal potatoes.
Yeah.
Loved that at that age. So like you could make like creamy spinach or just mix it in with the potatoes. He really loved that. And then I would occasionally put curry powder in it when he was a little bit older. Yeah. And that was like a bit of a taste buds explosion, but he actually really loved that. And I'm not a big fan of curry, so I'm surprised he likes it, but it's good. I think it's good to introduce them to different flavours as well. Yeah.
And in the curry powders, you've got like anti-inflammatories. Yeah. There's sort of, if you look at things like turmeric, it's an anti-inflammatory. Yeah. So if you're putting that in, because we all get a certain amount of inflammation, that's how we grow. Yeah. That's exactly, you don't grow without the kind of inflammation system going on in the body. That's what it's about. It ages us.
So I suppose you could roast the vegetables in like the turmeric or the coconut.
Oh yeah, I did that. Tiny bit of honey and like tiny bit of honey and
that honey's lovely. That's good.
Yeah. And roast the vegetables.
That's 12 months though with the honey, isn't it? You have to be careful.
I would wait until 12 months.
Oh, because she's 7 months.
Just be careful, not at 7 months.
Save this for in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, hopefully that answered her question.
Yeah,
I think if you try and focus on the fact that, okay, so where is my protein? So always try and think, once you've got over that initial bit, because initially you're playing with taste and everything, but once you start getting to 7 months, then really you should be introducing the proteins. So it's, where is my protein? Cod is a lovely one, that's a lovely easy fish that you can add in with a bit of sweet potato and some non-starchy vegetables as well. So maybe putting 3 ingredients, 3 different types of foods together, but make sure you've got your protein in there and your good fats
as well, so they don't become too carb heavy in their diets.
Right,
and there's a bit more of a balance. So there's a couple of other questions. So Jennifer, she wants to do baby-led weaning, but are worried about choking. Is there any advice? Their little one is 6 months, so just right at the beginning of the journey.
So lots of advice there. There's so much research out there telling you that there is no risk to choking. One of the first things I will say, and I know this is common sense to you mums out there, I know this is, but I have to say it, that is never ever leave your baby on their own when you're feeding them. Never do it. Don't even walk out the room to get anything, just make sure you stay with them. In regards to the choking, if you're baby-led weaning, you really need to wait until that reflex is gone, because that reflex will soon start going. So when you get that, then maybe you need to just back off for a little bit and then
okay, maybe again. It's a sign that they're not quite ready.
They're not quite ready yet, that reflex. I mean, obviously there is other signs to look for, the dribbling, the putting the hand in the mouth, anytime they see that you've got food in your hand, they're trying to pull it into their mouth. So you've got all of those sort of signs as well. Yeah. But on the surface of it, it's to make sure, safety first, that you're in the room with them. Yeah. They should just be picking up and just sucking those foods to start off with, certainly at 7 months.
Yeah, I chose vegetables that I was less nervous about. So broccoli I thought was brilliant because really they could hold it and it breaks down so much. You don't get big chunks coming off. Or even sort of, roasting sweet potatoes and things like that, again, so they go very soft. Yeah. And whereas I was always quite nervous about things like peppers or carrots because I just felt like they came off in such a big chunk. I just thought that there was more risk there, so I chose.
Sweet corn's also good because you can leave it whole.
Yeah,
probably coming out this time of the year as well. So you can just steam it until it's soft, and then they can just pick it up and soft it.
So maybe some of the vegetables that break down a lot easier and a bit softer. Yeah. If you're a bit nervous with the choking as well. Yeah, brilliant.
I somebody liked cucumbers. Cut them
and lovely lot of water in cucumbers, so they can really suck it and really get the nutrients out. So that's a really good thing.
Cucumbers was always a good one.
Yeah, because that breaks down quite easily as well, doesn't it? Another question that we've got on the list here is from Eleanor, and it was just, do you have any advice for dealing with grandparents who think we're crazy for doing baby-led weaning and think she's going to choke?
Okay. Yes, I do, and I think that the last time we did this talk, we talked about how that we used to have nanny goats and why goats are called nanny goats, because they used to suckle the babies onto them, didn't we? Remember we had that conversation. So what you need to be saying to grandparents is this is actually what their parents would have been doing.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have been going into the supermarket or wherever you go and get your food from, and you wouldn't be buying these packages and mixing them up and giving them to babies. What would have been happening is their parents would have fed them in that way.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't be able to go out and, they also didn't have the funds that we have, financially, to go and buy all this separate food. So could you imagine it? If you lived on a farm, you wouldn't be going down the supermarket and you'd be sort of cooking your meal, your family meal, and taking a bit out separately for baby.
Yeah, and letting the children chew on a bit of meat and whatever you're having.
Anything you have. So it's not. This is not new. This is the first how we used to feed babies in the beginning.
Yeah,
that's how we used to feed them. So baby-led weaning is absolutely the way to go if it suits you as a parent.
Yeah.
I can't stress that, because I think there is no right or wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose if you've got people who maybe might be caregivers, that's the thing with grandparents, is sometimes they might be caregivers to the children if you need help. And maybe
That's true.
Maybe sometimes you have to concede that when they have the child, they might want to give them purees rather than the foods that you're asked them to if they're not comfortable. I suppose sometimes there's that degree of respecting each other a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, or work with them and just say, look, watch this, and because it's lovely. They're watching them pick up and put foods in their mouth themselves and things like that is really it's really a lovely thing to watch. Isn't it?
Watching them being independent. Like,
yeah, once they're used to seeing you do it. So maybe spend a lot of time with them at meal times.
Before
so
you
they
actually
can
see.
So you can show them the grandparents a result and say, look how well they're doing, and they're trying really hard. And I think most people would sort of concede and say, okay,
once they've seen,
it's the rare parent that would go, you're not here, so
I'm
just going to give them some puree.
I was going to give them a load of sweets. That's what used to happen to
me. Oh gosh, no.
Yes, I remember it well.
So the other part that we wanted to talk about today was that transition then. So when you've got through the early stages of weaning and you've gone through that journey, and your children, I noticed with my daughter, it was a bit younger, it was around about 10 months, I certainly saw her appetite change for food, and she really started to want proper meals around about that stage. My son was a bit later. My son was probably about 14 months. But then when you start getting into really eating proper foods, and after the weaning stages, what do you start introducing then, and how do you take your kids on that journey when they're ready for a much more substantial meal?
So I think you were saying a few things about that earlier. Were you saying about with your son?
Yeah, so he was very resistant to starting on solids for a long time, and so I was breastfeeding up until he was about 14 months, and then he suddenly had a bit of an explosion where he was like wanted to eat everything, and so I was just giving him, he was having lots of porridge, he still loves the avocado, still loves the sweet potato, loves cheese. That's my issue with him. If it was up to him, he would eat cheese all day. So I have to hide it in the fridge. And people that follow the brand Mini Mealtimes, I'm always going, is that enough cheese? I think he's part cheese at this point. But once they're one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once they're one, barring a couple of things, they can kind of have almost everything.
Definitely.
So it's kind of a whole new world at that point. I think that's when it starts getting really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of want to introduce as many things as possible so they don't start getting really fussy.
Yeah.
They get used to chewing things properly, so their jaws, and that helps with speaking as well, doesn't it, when you start learning to speak.
Yeah.
And that coordination with the eyes and hand and the mouth and everything. But I think that you need to be touching all bases. Again, when you put your plate together, you need to be looking at where's my protein, where's my fat, and then you need to be putting in different forms of carbohydrates so that you've got, non-starchy. I always talk about non-starchy carbs and starchy carbohydrates. If you so an example I'll give you is the fact that, say you've got an apple. Now that apple, the outside of the apple, that is your what I would say that is going to be broken down, but it's not going to be absorbed. It's going to be used as roughage in the bowel to help them go to the toilet.
Okay.
The inside bit's going to be the one that's soluble, and that's soluble. That's going to be broken down. So all of that's going to be used as the body in the body, and that's so. Therefore, you need to make sure that you have different types of vegetables and fruits going in, so that you don't have that. Just one. Because a lot of the time, I find that parents are saying, "Well, they just like sweet corn, and they just like and they just like bananas, and they just like grapes," and they are all quite high in the sugars. So it's making sure that you touch your base. So I always try and say, right, I've got my protein and my carbohydrate there. Then I've got my starchy carbohydrate. So the starchy carbohydrate can be sweet potato, it could be carrots, it could be beetroot.
So really think of just your earth vegetables when
Yes.
you're talking about starchy
Like growing
carbohydrate.
underground.
Anything
Growing
growing underground,
Yeah.
rather than your
Starchy.
white potato, which is
That's
what we
right.
tend to sort of think sometimes, don't we?
Yeah.
That grey carb.
And then I try and put in at least 2 or 3 non-starchy.
Yeah.
So there we were talking about broccoli earlier, weren't
Yeah.
we? So broccoli, green beans, you know, so you're cauliflower, you're then trying to sort of touch bases with
Yeah,
that.
we always make squash or pumpkin
Squash
bake.
and pumpkins.
So it's got like, and you can throw in thyme, you can throw in parsnips,
Yeah.
and then that's all that's a lovely vegetarian meal, and wholemeal bread. You can chuck it in there as well, so you
Yeah.
get lots of seeds and things like that. So I think that's quite a good recipe, very easy
Yeah.
to make. I'm a big fan of bakes for kids,
Yeah.
bakes and pies, because you can throw in so many vegetables. You can do a fish one, a meat one,
Yeah.
and they're really easy
I think
to
it
make.
gives it a natural sweetness as well, doesn't it? When you roast something, you get a
Yeah, it
natural
does,
sweetness
yeah.
come
Yeah.
out, and because children do have a naturally sweeter tooth, because breast milk is quite sweet,
Yeah.
isn't it? I suppose.
It is, yeah.
So if you can
definitely,
get, when you roast like the sweet potatoes or you roast your vegetables, then you
Yeah.
get a little bit of that sweetness come out. So it does help encourage them to get it in a little bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, interesting enough, I go out to a biodynamic farm. By biodynamic farming, what that is just how they sort of plant to the moon, and you're supposed to get more yield.
Oh,
And it's really interesting because when I go out there, I do quite a lot of talks and things like that out there. And the interesting thing is when we're working with children, we find that some of the children they go and they won't eat the fruit because they say it's bitter, like the black currants and things like that.
Oh,
They say it's really
wow.
bitter. But ethnically, you find other children that they will just eat it and they will just love it.
Yeah.
So it is that palate. We're trying to be changed to be more, to be more of a sweeter palate. And really, do we want that?
Yeah.
Because the bitter is all really good for the liver. That's what bitter is all about.
Oh, okay.
Really good for
and that's why
liver.
the green vegetables then they're a bit more bitter,
Yeah.
aren't they? And that's because they're good food for the liver.
Yeah, very good for the liver. So anything that's bitter is really good for the liver.
Yeah.
And apples would be bitter, but they're not so much now.
Yeah.
And also going on the fact that we're talking about being over 12 months, that's when you could be introducing things like eggs. Scrambled egg is a good one.
Yeah.
Just to see. If you think they might have an allergy, then what you can do is scramble the egg, the way you're going to give it to them, rub a little bit on their wrist,
See.
and then leave it overnight and just see whether there's a reaction there. If it's red, then you don't.
That's a
really
really
want
good
them
idea.
to
And you
have
could
it.
do that with any food, I
Do that with
suppose.
any food. But give it to them in the form that you're going to feed it to them in.
Okay.
So you can do it with raw egg.
Or just rub an egg on it.
Just rub an egg on it there.
Pre-make it, pre-cook it, and then give them a little try. Yeah, a little patch test.
Yeah. So those are all things that you can do. But so eggs, nuts are a good thing. So nut butters are really good.
Yeah.
A really good snack is like a slice of apple with some nut butter on it. You've got your carbohydrate there going in, and then you've got your good healthy fat.
Yeah. But we were talking
your
again
protein.
earlier, weren't we, about using the 100%
Yeah.
nut butters, not the
Yeah.
ones that
That's
are
what you
sort of
buy.
cut down with palm oil and sugar and that type of thing, keeping it, and that again, to help with your palate,
Yeah,
so that
definitely.
you don't get that very unnatural sweetness to it, and you have
Yeah.
a better palate.
So it's
for food.
looking at what you buy. It's actually being involved in it,
Yeah.
and being involved in what you buy, and
Yeah.
and putting things together in that way.
Yeah.
Another recipe that I make a lot is spinach and banana muffins, and my
that's
son loves them. And it's packed. You put like a huge bag of spinach, and obviously spinach can go a long way. But
Yeah.
and they're little green. I call them monster muffins, which he seems to think is quite funny. But you can either put honey in there to make it sweet, banana, but peanut butter kind of thing, and yeah.
Another way. That's a brilliant breakfast idea, I suppose,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Because like you were saying earlier, I do find that at the moment when I'm trying to get out of the house, my daughter for school, and my son's just been messing around, not eating. You're conscious that he hasn't had anything to eat, so maybe something from the go like that is brilliant.
I think as well as helping, you just make giant batches of things, and then they cook in 20 minutes. You pop them in the oven in the morning, and then they come out all fresh, and you're like, I'm the perfect mother.
Yeah. And that smell around the house as well. It's like really lovely.
Some of the questions then that we've had just about that year one transition. So Jess Reese, she's said that she has a 12-month-old, and we give her a bottle 3 times a day. Should we start reducing this, or give her as much milk as she wants?
So I would definitely think that you need to start looking at reducing that. And the way to do it is to feed food first. So instead of just giving the bottle, I mean, let's be honest, most babies like either late at night or first thing in the morning, they might like a bottle, so that's absolutely fine. So work on the lunchtime one or the one during the day, but feed first. If you feed them the food first and then maybe wait a little while, because it's what basically happens is, we haven't got time to really go into it, but we have it's like a system. Our body does that all day. So when certain enzymes are high, you're hungry, and then those enzymes will go down, and as they go down, other enzymes will come up. So you've got that's how we end up feeling hungry.
Oh, okay.
You've noticed it, haven't you? All of a sudden, oh, I feel a bit hungry. That's when they've levelled off like that, and one's going up. And so, and it literally does do that all day. So if you eat regularly and you eat meals that are, when I say carbohydrates, proteins and fats, then you'll keep that nicely in balance. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you've touched bases with the food first, and then if you're going to offer bottle, at least wait 20 minutes for that system to actually kick in.
And then if they don't want it,
and then if they don't want it, then you can start reducing that.
Okay. Could you also just reduce the amount you give them? So if your child is maybe having 8 ounces, you just start cutting that down to less and less as well.
That would be a really good idea to do that as well. Because sometimes it can be a comfort thing in the afternoon. So maybe if you're just giving them just a few ounces, then they might want to sleep on that. So
I definitely found that with my son. It's a real comfort thing for him. Definitely.
Didn't we say something about it depends on what they mean by milk? So is it formula milk or full fat milk or semi-skim milk? Because if they're eating 3 meals and then having formula as well, formula's like a meal in itself.
Yeah, that's right.
So that kind of depends on the answer. But I mean, it's still your advice still holds as well.
No, you're 100% right. It does depend as well, because with breast milk, a lot of the time for those of you who breastfeed, that they go on and they sometimes they're dropping off, aren't they? And it's that comfort thing. And one thing I will say is, and I'm sure you guys feel the same, but mine are older, so my oldest son is 23, so looking back, that time was so short, but when I was in that time I didn't realise, but now I look back and I think, oh, that time was so short. So it is to just relax about things and just just really, because at the end of the day you'll look back and you go through all these stages with babies and toddlers and everything. It is just a stage, because they'll get to where they're going to go
eventually.
So it's just really enjoy it. That those particular times. Like I love it when you were saying earlier about your little boy. He wants a biscuit and cheese. And, please cheese. And that kind of thing. It's like, oh, my heart.
I know, it's gone.
It's very hard to say no to them when they're like, big eyes. You're like, oh, you're so lovely.
That's the same thing though when they like one type of food. It's when my son being a difficult eater, you do find it so easy just to go back to that one thing that they like. And I guess sometimes it's about who can be more stubborn, you or the little one.
Definitely.
How can you encourage them to? But I think it also helps to talk to people in similar situations, people that have been there, because I think, at least for me and the people I've spoken to, it's a lot about reassurance, and even if you are doing all the right things, you still feel insecure and you still worry. And just hearing it from someone else going, no, that's a great meal, oh, they're eating so well, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I find that's a big thing as well. Just getting the reassurance and talking to people
who are going through the same thing. There's a question here actually from Hayley, and she was just asking about any suggestions for healthy snacks. And just in addition to that, I had a bit of a question about how many meals and snacks you should give your children when they're 12 months, because like we were saying earlier about the size of their stomachs, are they still very small at 12 months?
So
is it still
they're fifth.
Hello,
Hayley. I mean that would be a really good way around it. I still think that we should be feeding them about 5 times a day at that age, but little and often. So remember, I was saying you start at how old did you say?
There's no age here from Hayley.
Oh,
it's just saying any suggestions for healthy snacks, really. So if you're looking at a meal, what would you have a snack?
So one of the problems is again that we tend to lean towards those carbohydrates when we look at snacking. But really, as I was saying earlier, a slice of apple with some nut butter on it, and certainly looking at different types of nut butters, making sure you know what they're in. You can make them little smoothies as well. So those are always quite really good things for snacks. Even little pieces of cheese. So cheese is really good. So you can have cheese and cucumber. or cheese and celery, something like that. If you're going to baby-led wean, they can pick the celery sticks up.
Yeah,
Pepper with hummus is brilliant as well.
Hummus is
fantastic. My son hates hummus though.
Oh really?
It's so annoying. It's such a good little snack. You're saying that he will not eat it.
Yeah.
I think I might give up, but still try to persevere.
Or cream cheese. Cream cheese is good. Will he eat cream cheese?
You could make like a guacamole or something, couldn't you? Just without
well,
the chili.
He loves avocado actually. Yeah, so. Yeah, we don't.
Or you can do that, or you can do the one of my sons really loves the tomato one, so it's a tomato salsa.
Oh,
he
nice,
absolutely loves that. Yeah. So you can have a salsa, and again, you can put in different things to have with the salsa as well. Yeah. So I always like the fact of you can cut up sort of apples, pears, and things like that, and you can put them with different things as well. Then you've got the context of different flavours. So you've got, you've got your sweet there, you've got your, but you've also got your savoury, so you've got those different flavours. Yeah,
we always do a lot of sort of granola bars, oat bars that are packed with stuff, snacks a lot.
Or making muffins, like, as you said earlier, that's a good thing if you're happy with cooking and doing that type of thing.
And when you're making muffins, you don't have to just stick to using just wholemeal flour or just flour. You can, there's almond flour, there's all different flours that you can try and use. I think it's a good point to try and almost make sure you have some sort of nuts and seeds in there as well. And some fruits are always good, like, bananas go well in sort of muffins and things like that as well.
And yoghurt as well.
Yeah, yoghurt. Well. Yes, yogurt's brilliant.
You just throw some granola in there. I saw a really good recipe. It was, especially for the hot weather, just you shove some granola in the freezer mixed with yogurt and fruit like berries and things like that, and then 5 or 6 hours later they're like nice little crunchy. And I think for 12 months that's quite good, because as you eat them, even though it's still crunchy, it will start to melt. So at that age, I think it's quite a good.
I used to make, I used to get the Yo Valley ones because they were the cleanest yogurt that I could find, and I make little pops with those. So I put either a straw or a spoon or something in that, and I put that in the freezer, and then that's what they have as an ice pop, and my kids love that.
I saw something the other day where somebody was freezing their breast milk
and
giving it to the baby as a lollipop.
That
was a brilliant idea.
No, I wish I'd done that.
But also, the other thing that you can do as well is that you can make a smoothie and you can freeze that smoothie.
Yeah, it's great for teething as well, I suppose, for kids who are teething.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always trying to, again, make sure that you've touched all bases with your protein, carbohydrate and fat, so that you've got all three of them in there. So, you can blend seeds in, you can put other, you can even blend a little bit of avocado in, and you can freeze it. So it's to make sure that you're touching all bases when you're actually doing that. But you can make some lovely lollies and things like that, especially with this weather now. And
when I do smoothies, I try to put a lot of not a lot, but flaxseed in there.
Yeah, flaxseed, really good for the digestive health. So
brilliant.
That's good.
So a question through on Facebook at the moment from Courtney. She's saying, what healthy foods can I try my son on? He's a fussy 2-year-old and was a prem baby. He does have some fruits, but would like to get him into other fruits and vegetables. Are there any methods I could try for a fussy little one?
Great.
Sorry, what was her name?
So this is from Courtney.
Hello,
she's a 2-year-old.
Hello, Courtney. I would be suggesting that what you try and do is you try and hide it in foods. I think you were talking about that earlier, weren't you? Yeah. Where if you make pies and things like that you can really hide different vegetables in food. But also, one of the things that I found really beneficial was that while I was preparing the meal, I would cut up different vegetables and they would just be on the table. And when I went in the room, they'd be gone. Because they're a bit older, the children. There's how many months old?
So no, it's 2-year-olds.
2-year-olds. Yeah. By the time they're 2, it's to be kind of really relaxed about it.
Yeah, don't pressure them.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
just have to be very. I would say keep offering things.
Yeah.
And just make sure they're not having a bad reaction to it. But I think if you try to force them to eat certain things, they become very averse to it, and it makes them not want to eat it at all. Or then just take a break from it for a couple of weeks and then try again.
Yeah, and also involve them in their meals. So remember, we were talking about baby-led weaning. They're actually involved in the foods that they have. So it's trying to involve them in their meals. So when you're putting something together, if you've got some celery and you've got some cream cheese, they go quite nicely together.
Yeah,
and really, it's relaxed. It's what I was saying earlier. It's such a short period of time. But don't go down the route of just feeding them things like biscuits and things like that. The best way to avoid that is just don't have them in the house. And if you are going to feed them, then get them involved in making. At 2 years old, they would love to be making things like that. Then they're more inclined to eat it.
Yeah, they love to help.
But
I would also say, it's okay if they don't like certain things. I mean, as adults, there's foods that we don't like, but we don't force ourselves to eat them. You just find healthier alternatives. So, you know, if they don't like one type of fruit, we'll try something else. If they don't like one type of protein, try something else. There's so many options in the world. So it's not the be all and end of all.
But being persistent, I think, is right, isn't it? Because there are some days where, they're just not in the mood for that thing that day. So just keep introducing foods because,
and that can be loads of things, can't it? It can be weather, it can be, there can be loads of different reasons why they're not up for that, or they just don't feel like that for that day.
Exactly.
But it is to try and be really relaxed about it, because I know you were saying earlier that, you used to get worried about things. Well, it's just to be quite relaxed about it and just making sure that, they're touching all bases with what they're having.
I think I'll always worry a little bit though. I don't think that goes away, I don't know. I'm still convinced, my grandmother still asks me sometimes, like, what have I had for lunch if I'm eating well? I'm like, I'm a grandmother.
But that's nice.
It cares for you. So another question that's come through is from Catherine Marshall, and my son's 14 months, and she's just asking, is using a sauce out of a jar that bad? And I guess this comes down to that guilt, isn't it? As a parent, sometimes you just don't have time to do everything from scratch. So actually, is it so bad to...
No, you might have a different answer to me. I am going to say that I'm very much about moderation. It depends on the brand, because like we were saying earlier, some brands are a lot better than others. And sometimes you don't have time to make everything from scratch and super healthy. I think if you are going to have a pre-made sauce that you buy from a jar, check the ingredients to make sure it's not too high in sugar and salt and things like that. And then also I would say limit it in general. Try to not make that a regular thing. But you might be completely opposite.
No, what I would be saying is, are they well? If the baby is well and the toddler is well, then there's no reason that they can't have some of the things out of the sauces. That's the long and short of it all is, if they're not well, if they're very, very ill, with various things that sometimes children can have, then you need to think twice about how you feed them. If they're well, then those sort of foods are absolutely fine in moderation in the diet.
And I suppose if you're looking at what you feed them, if you're feeding them something every single day, that maybe a sauce out of a jar that was maybe designed for an adult and wouldn't have the ideal salt. But if it's just every now and again, but the rest of their diet is balanced out with...
It's also about portions as well. If they're having
portion sizes.
What I think, once my son ate like an adult sized portion of pasta, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh my god, it was terrifying. He just devoured it. But whereas like portions, I think as well, appetite, and you want to make sure that you're not giving them too much, because sometimes they will just eat it because it's there, and it's like the brain going, the plate's not empty, and they like it, so they might eat all of it. But then that's not necessarily ideal, because as we're saying, their stomachs are only tiny, and we want to be doing little and often, ideally.
But it was going back to what I was saying earlier about, so if you're out for the day and sometimes you might need something that, then that's absolutely fine.
She shouldn't feel guilty or anything.
No. And also I think that you don't need to make massive changes to the diet to actually really reap the benefits of how you feel. I work with some people and we just tweak the diet. So when we just tweak the diet, it has a massive effect on their health. But it really is. If you had a child that is suffering from constipation and things like that, you need to really think about what you're doing in regards to putting in those sort of foods, because they can just irritate the bowel a bit more. But if they're well and healthy, then there's no reason. There's nothing to worry about.
You said watch their diets, because I was saying earlier that I try to limit how much sugar my son has, but if he has a day where he has a lot, I notice you can see visibly how unwell he gets, like tummy wise. And so I think not having things in the house is a big thing as well, isn't it? Because the kids, as soon as they see anything that's snack based, that's the only thing they'll want to have instead of the meal that you've given them. So
that's right.
Just manage what you offer them as well, isn't it?
Yes.
There's another question that's come through. It does go back a little bit to the previous topic, I suppose, of puree versus baby led. But it's, is baby cereal a best start, or is veg best? And how long is breast milk the main source of nutrition?
So breast milk is the main source of nutrition as long as you want to give it. I mean, they say at a year you should be really we should be going over to proper food, or real food as I would call it. Because you would agree with that, wouldn't you, that it's a year that when we go across to proper food, and certainly for things like iron, you really need to be making sure that they're touching all bases to get certain foods like that.
Because your iron levels drop, I think after 6 months or something, in the breast milk, your iron levels drop to not nothing, but really drastically. So you want to make sure that they're still getting it in their diet when they get older. I mean, I breastfed a little bit longer, But that was just because my son wasn't quite ready. But I think probably in hindsight, probably could have done it a little bit earlier. But you know, every child is.
Well, I think that work again. That's when if we're talking about general population here. That's the advice given.
Yeah.
But individually, then it's different.
Yeah.
Because if I'm working with somebody individually, I would be giving them perhaps different advice.
Yeah.
So, and as long as he's growing, and as long as you're quite comfortable with, and he's healthy, again, you know, he's well. Then, but just if we're just going to talk about general, then we need to be quite clear on the general population, because they are two different things.
Yeah.
So what was the other part of the question?
So the question was: is cereal best to start or veg? And I think we touched on that earlier. Probably
Yeah,
veg is the way
definitely.
to go.
It's got to be veg, I mean, definitely, because cereal will spike blood sugars.
Yeah.
Cereal is quite rapidly absorbed by the bloodstream, and so what you really need is it to be a bit more flatline, a bit more easier to absorb.
So veg and breast milk for that first
breast
year,
milk for that
really,
first year,
is
veg.
picking up on what Anne's
Definitely.
asking there.
Yeah.
And also, when we talk about fruit as well, when we talk about fruit, I always say to people, if you only ever bought fruit in this country, it was never imported.
Yeah.
How much fruit would you be eating in, say, January?
Yeah, it's about that was a really interesting point that you mentioned last time. Actually, is what's seasonal,
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that, because that's what our body needs.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, I think we are literally running out of time.
Oh,
I could talk for ages. We could talk for
we could
ages.
talk for ages.
So thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah.
That was brilliant,
thank
and hopefully
you.
we'll do another.
And
another
thank
live
you for
soon.
everybody that's out there. We've really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Hopefully, found these questions and answers
Yeah, and you can
helpful.
still keep sending questions through, and I'm sure Geraldine can, if there's anything coming
Yeah,
through, we could
definitely.
answer
I mean, you
questions.
can put questions on the Food Nutritionist's Facebook page as well.
And when's the app coming
yours?
out? Soon?
So the app will be launching in September. So if you go over to the Mini Meal Times page, you can follow us and you can sign up so you know when we're launching.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So
Sounds
have a follow.
excellent. The
Brilliant.
Mini Meal Times page. It
Yeah.
sounds really
Yeah.
good.
Lovely. Thank you so much.